You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry presiding.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Radio Free Larry.
All right, we'll continue here. I had to speak to my neighbor there. He has a vehicle, and he's most graciously offered me a ride, and he did it in a nice way. And to some, it would seem usury, but he said, I don't mind giving you a ride because I'm going to need you to drive my car a couple days to take me for some procedures, medical procedures. So kind of, I'll give you a hand whenever you need it. Just give me a hand when I need it. That type of thing. So again, the Bible is clear in the Old Testament and the New Testament somewhat that the sins of the government are really more important to get a hold of than the sins of the people. The sins of the people tend to be small sins, and that's covered under the blood of the Lamb, Rabbi Jesus, and also if you're Jewish, the salvation in ancient times. That's covered. But when we get to the sins of the government, it seems like God is not so quick to forgive. And God is downright ornery and seeks vengeance against corrupt governments. Now, it doesn't mean that you're Christian. Again, God is not a respecter of persons. So if you are the model Christian, that's okay. But it's not going to stop God. If God gives you a reprieve, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Do not look a gift horse in the mouth because you've been doing that for decades. I told you after the economic crash or during it, what's happening is people are beginning to repent. Things are starting to change. So you're seeing positive things happen. But what happens is they turn evil again. And again, we are very concerned about government sins. And then those government sins extend to the government, what I call paramilitaries. Your psychological warfare people within the community. Could a psychological warfare person that's committing crimes against U.S. citizens actually do some good for the nation? Visually, yes. Visually, yes. Physically, could appear that way. Because, of course, most of what they're doing is either in secrecy or covered up by a scam, by a contract. The FISA court's only one small problem in the systemic issue. Again, nobody takes on the President of the United States as government employees the first day they involve themselves in criminal enterprise. So basically, your government is a mafia. And there are people in many mafia organizations that aren't part of the mafia. They're simply employees. Yet, bet your bottom dollar, there are no employees that are not supervised or around members around members of the mafia to keep an eye on everything. So that's your government in reality. And when I put that dead cat thing back on in honor of Isolation Island Leper Cruise, because I suggested that he should use one. To take that background noise out, get a headset. But the reality is, if I'm telling you that it has to do with me and what happened to me and what's happening to me doesn't mean that it doesn't have to do with anyone else. Although it could be one person. Because that's how personal God is. Remember, if you mess with one man, you can cause God to destroy a city. That's been seen throughout biblical history and history. The history you read about is only a very small portion of history. And now I'm not saying they're messiahs, but God sends what God has called Messiah men to earth. And they take on, and I told you that I wasn't one, so you don't get your cells all worked up in your deep state confused and deluded minds. But they were sent to earth rabbis. And they were attempting to usher in the Mashiach time period, and they were killed before they could. And quite frankly, Rabbi Jesus is one. But yet Jesus got further than everyone else and was that one that was provided. Can a Jew get to heaven without Jesus? Yes. Can a non-Jew get to heaven without Jesus? Yes. Do I recommend it? No. The Bible's clear that God will take to heaven those that God chooses. If you think you're going to muscle God by perceiving something biblically, then you might find yourself in hell, smitten upon cheek, upon cheek, upon cheek, upon cheek. Because that's the way it is. What you will find in religion today, they attempt to own God. Instead of, like Jesus said, hey, I'm out of here. Rabbi Jesus said, hey, I did my thing. It's your turn. You're on. Which means that's for everybody. Anybody can come along and engage in a work for God. God is not a Bible. God is not a book. God is not a church. God is not that alone. God can be those things. God can be the Bible. Because the Word is with God and is God. But yet it can also be something else. Again, how do we do that? What tells us what that is? Not by might. Not by power. But by God's Spirit. If God's Spirit is not in the Bible, then it's not with God. Can God remove His Spirit from the Bible? Of course. See it all day long. Every heinous religious person who's ever come along in the name of Christianity has perverted the Bible, and God's Spirit is no longer within it. So again, your government and those people that are with them, the government paramilitaries, they're a psychological warfare entity. Could be your mother, could be your brother, could be your sister, could be your uncle, could be a 90-year-old woman, could be a 5-year-old child if they're used in that way by their parents. Are trying to cause somebody to fall. It's not a sting operation in a traditional sense where there's options. And even in traditional stings today, because the devils, the demons, the antichrist, the witches, the sorcerers are in government, do people really have a chance? There's no doubt that government was meant to be a moral thing, but not your morals, not your friend's morals, not your uncle's morals, but the morals that matter the most in government as God sees it real time. So what does that tell you? It's meant to be run by people that are rightly related to God. Does it mean they're perfect? No. Based upon Jewish teaching, rabbinical teaching, especially if we look at Rabbi Emden, and I know the rabbis know all of this, anybody that manifests largely on the planet that's prolific, and that includes spiritually prolific, is going to have strange things in their lives, such as concubines. So, has President Trump ever done the wrong thing? Yes, he's already confessed in front of the world. You might have missed it if you were somebody who doesn't understand reality and how it works and how the Bible works. But Rabbi Emden has already said that somebody that is at the level of President Trump would most likely have that. Now, is that an intelligent man or what? And if you go to Jewish history and you go to the Jews today, they're like, I hate that rabbi, I like that rabbi. You know, most people have something you can use no matter who they are. And even more so for rabbinical teaching. So this whole idea of hating on another person and rejecting anything they ever said is the reason why nothing manifests today in the right order. So, am I saying COVID-19 threat is over? No. Am I saying that it looks good and it looks like people are repenting and it looks like we're moving forward? Yes. But what's worse than not repenting? Repenting falsely. The worst thing you can do is repent falsely. There's a movie, I think it's The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds. I think he tried committing suicide. And at a certain point, he starts like praying to God. And he's like, God, if you help me. So again, God expects not perfection, but God expects the major thing that I'm speaking about to cease. Now, I don't know that fella, Eric Prince, except, he made a lot of money off of the government, multimillionaire, and he engages in a lot of activity for government. Do I think it's real? Do I think it's honest? Got no clue, to tell you the truth. All I can do is present the scenario one way and the other way. I can't do that investigation because the people that are supposed to investigate the corrupt government people are the corrupt government people, so that doesn't happen. But when you have government contractors engaging in psychological activity, and we have nobody that's willing to stop them from doing the wrong thing, then the reality is that we have to speak about what could be wrong versus just saying, okay, these people are in place to make sure things don't go wrong, and I'm sure at some point, if something went wrong, they would take care of it. Obviously, that's no longer true. When I was in government, that's what I believed. That at some point, if things went wrong, they would correct it. But come to find out that they use the most advanced technology. Now, if Kroll is out there working for Harvey Weinstein, and they don't miss a beat, and in fact they work for DOJ and whoever else, CIA, FBI, whoever it is, that sends the wrong message to the world. But the right message to what they're calling the deep state today. So again, in Isaiah, God said, hey, you're not doing this for the people. You're not doing good things for the people. Essentially, you're there to take care of people. In fact, you're causing them to fall. You're causing them to be unhealed. You're causing issue for them. Now, God says, I will personally take them by the hand. Now, the thing with God you have to understand is God does not see death anywhere close to any of us. Now, God understands our emotion around death. God understands the spectrum of pleasant and unpleasant death. But yet, you all do also and have manipulated with that. But when God says he will do something, it doesn't always mean that it will happen here. Again, the Christian teachings say that your crowns are in heaven. So again, if God says, I will take my people, that might be in the end that God would do that. It may not be here and now. It may be, okay, time to move forward. Now, I've had a lot of spirits come in the last few weeks. God has been speaking. Watch for secondary touching of something after you decontaminate. It'll happen 2, 3, 4 times. You'll decontaminate and you'll touch something. Now, if you're blinded, you won't see that. I've had very few times where I was blinded, but I had many times where I was caused to touch something before I would partake of a meal that would recontaminate me possibly. And that's the deep state. That's what their curses do. That's what the beast is. So the COVID-19 was willed up directly and indirectly. First off, because this is where we have to get to. You're all talking, oh, the Chinese did it, the U.S. did it. You know, pretty soon it'll be the French did it. Could be the French. But spiritually what happens is, if you curse enough people, and again, I only give way to God. I don't will anything. I've made parameters. My heart is so, and just believe me, that no matter what I say, because you can be caused to say anything by the government that I speak about. Believe you me, you'll tell them anything they want to hear. That's why you get false confessions. I brought this up before. You get false confessions because the government wills the person to confess. And they have actually psychologically operated them along with it. And willing somebody is a curse. If somebody wills you, they're willing you outside the will of God. Irregardless, even if they will you to church, if they use personal will. But people are cursing people to have harm in their life. And I'll tell you what, COVID-19 caused a lot of disruption in my life. I was ready to buy a vehicle. I had enough money in the bank, and the next paycheck would have put it over the top for a nice down payment. I had somebody that was thinking about sending me a vehicle, and I wouldn't even have to go get it. So there were so many things that were looking up. My walks were coming in, my blood pressure went down, everything went back to the way it was. I'm at 175 pounds at this point. Haven't weighed that since before the insanity began. So I'm lean. I'm going down. I'm trying to go down to 165. But I have all these things that are cropping up because I can't get to my massage. So again, you will me away from a massage. There's no doubt that you did that. You cursed me away from massage. You will me and curse me from my bicycle riding. You willed me and cursed me away from where I was living because it wasn't easy access for you. But I really don't believe this place is easier access. So this place is actually a little more protected spiritually, and it doesn't have a public entrance, like a door where you have to go through that everybody touches. So I did an Exodus. God told me go, and I went. So again, there are positive things that happened out of that, but there are also negative things that happened out of that. But the will, it's beyond any doubt that the will and curses of the deep state, also known as the beast, brought COVID-19 here. And every time they move against me and will something, it moves a little further. Now, again, protection isn't always from God. Satan can protect you. Look how Satan protected the people that came against Rabbi Jesus. Look at how God protected the people that came against the saints and the martyrs. Or not that God, Satan protected them. And again, that tells me something. Satan is the god of this world. So again, they'll cause a faux pas in your speech. You'll misspeak. But it'll actually have a seeing event within it. So they worship the God of this world, and they call it Jesus, they call it God. So it's just a fact of life that I've known for at least 15 years now. So again, their will, their curses needed to be effectuated. People were speaking well of me. I was giving a bicycle to a person there. So things were looking up for the way people would see me within the community. And believe me, they were psychologically operating me the whole way. They had actually put a couple people in. That was obvious. Got rid of the other management, got new management in there. So things kind of got shook up. From what I could see, based upon what the spirits are telling me mostly, they were going to attempt to do a massage envy there and try to get me banned from all Woodspring Suites forever. But that's your government, because they let it happen, whether it's government people or not. But I do believe there are government people involved directly. This is what your government does. This is why you have COVID-19. This is why we're still fighting terrorism. There's no blessing in what they are. If they do some decent work, it doesn't erase that level of abomination. And on top of that, they're psychologically operating people to be mass shooters, psychologically operating people to be sexual offenders, saying, well, we're giving them choices. And in some cases, they won't even tell you the truth, because they don't want to deal with a Garland-type event where they have to protect themselves. Well, it's our discretion to destroy somebody's life for 20 years until they offended because they were so dangerous. But, of course, they won't tell you it that way. And, of course, some of it they will tell you. They will say, oh, they're so dangerous. This is why we do this. But yet, you can watch dangerous person after dangerous person after dangerous person live grand, beautiful, unbothered lives. Why? Because it's not law enforcement. It's communism. It's totalitarianism. It's the Politburo. That's what's here. The evil spirit that was the Soviet Politburo is here in your executive branch employees, federal, state, and local, along with their private sector criminal paramilitaries. They don't have to carry a gun. They carry psychological warfare. They carry drugs to adulterate people with. That psychological warfare will adulterate your psychological state. No matter how good of a person you are, you're going to have a fall. So when you see somebody in your community all of a sudden become somebody that they weren't, you have to understand that people are using techniques in law enforcement and even in community that they were never supposed to use. It was restricted for combat. That's what we were supposed to use against our enemies, but it enriches people because they're paid, and then we go back to Eric Prince. Don't know if he's doing it, but he could be out there engaging in combat operations all day against the enemies of the Republican Party and have the blessing of all these people you see on television telling us that they're Christians. You see? So what is God to do? We've been speaking for at least 15 years. I mean, you knew what I was saying. You know what I said came true and is coming true. Why? Because God has to put it in your face, or you won't accept what God says because you think you're the be-all, the do-all of God because you happen to run a church, a temple, a mosque, a gurdwara, whatever it is. The people are the love of God, not the institutions. You have to get back to that fact. The small little people are the love of God. That which is first will be last. That which is last will be first. God told you a million times to a million different people, including Rabbi Jesus. But what you want us to believe, all of you, is it's you. Because you're just so wonderful because you have $1 million and you spent $100,000 on something. You can't buy off God. The Bible is clear. The Torah is clear. In fact, the other scriptures around the world are clear. So it's really funny because I move and there's a person here, or the people that run this here are from India. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Something's going on. God's doing something. So then I go to get a doctor because I need to get checked out because everything's kind of weird. I just want to, get checked out, have a checkup, that kind of thing, and ask a few questions about what I should do to go forward from where I am. And I brought up even COVID-19. She agreed, no massages. It doesn't make sense right now. It's probably a little risky. But she turns out to be from a family from India because she doesn't have an accent at all, so I imagine she's second generation. And her name is funny when you know the Hindu scriptures. And, it's not always really the Hindu scriptures. It's funny how people use paintbrush terms, because when I was in the Hare Krishnas, when I was busy becoming all things for all people, they would call the people from India that weren't part of the Hare Krishna Vaishnav sect Hindus. Oh, the Hindus come here on Saturday, or Sunday, whatever it was, they said, I can't remember. But it gets a little crazy around here when the Hindus come. Like the Hindus. Aren't you a Hindu? So again, it's pretty funny because people call them Hindu. But, Hinduism, God's very intelligent. Don't take things away from God. Don't think that God didn't do other things other than what you are and what you do and what you believe in. God says in the Bible, God is the God of all peoples. But when you understand what Hindu was, a bunch of people that believed in God. Now, it got shifted around. There were different sects that believe in other things other than where it started and where some of the Hindus are. But it was a bunch of people that believed in God and got together, and they didn't worship the same. There was all these different beliefs and all these different books. But they wanted to come under one banner because why? Because they believed God. They believed in God. Now, you get to some of the rhetoric in the church, and it condemns the one world church. But yet they want to become the one world church. But yet the Bible speaks about a unity of the Spirit, a unity of the church. So it's a very confusing analysis of the religious psyches that we have on the planet. And I've been speaking about those for a decade and a half now. So again, the psyche of these things are all impregnated with a mind virus, which we can call the beast, we can call the deep state, we can call Satan. But there's a mind virus going around, and it has affected people. And I know a lot of people look at the millennials and go, well, what do you expect? And then, people bring up scripture, if, the people call by my name, seek my face, turn towards my face, pray, humble yourselves. I mean, that's as enthusiastic as God could get with all of you. Because it's all nonsense. It's all marketing. You've learned marketing. You've learned how to market things and be deceptive versus being real. So it was a good time for me to be there. It was bad, and that the deep state had cursed me so bad and had turned my life upside down so bad that I had several things that caused me to be ill. Now, it's really weird because as I fix one, then the next thing happens. So they have a lot of power. I can analyze that, or anti-power, should I say. I hate calling it power. So the Antichrist is up. If you find your finances are up and the Antichrist is up, well, It doesn't mean that you're anti-Christus, but it could mean that the Antichrist is trying to, or the Antichrists are trying to deceive you, keep you busy looking at money. And again, it's okay if the president speaks about things, but you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful on where you're focusing without focusing in other directions. So there is a need to make sure that it's all balanced. Now, I'm not saying, hey, buy into the Democratic Party argument, because they haven't said anything worthwhile, because they're part of it also. So again, I warned you about using the deep state for your own devices, because there is a conservative deep state. I told you that. But what you're going to do is cause the nation to be cursed further. And what Satan will do is Satan will give you all the money in the world, and God will even let you have it at times. Because to God, death is not real. Because death, keep going and cause death, and then the evil ones will go off to hell, and the good ones will go back to God. And of course, there's none good, no, not one, but the ones that truly believe and are those that have taken advantage of the free gift, but yet have not engaged in sin unto death, have not caused others to fall by spiritual methods, by will, by cursing. And then there are those that are blind. Their sins will not be held against them. And the Bible teachings tell us that and you could see how Jesus was speaking, that it was obviously also spiritually blind. Now, I want to tell you something. Listen to this. What if Rabbi Jesus and all his teachings were about spiritually blind people, not physically blind? Would that bother you? That if all Rabbi Jesus could do was give spiritual vision versus physical vision? I'm not telling you that that's the truth. What I'm telling you is quit trying to own things and just focus on what you're told to focus on. Because if I told people, look, I believe somebody can come on a planet and touch you if God empowers them and heal anything and everything, including blindness, physical blindness. But if you want to tell me that there's no way to do it, and that the only person that you could see doing something like that is spiritual blindness, because you've seen it done before, then I'm saying fine. It doesn't tell me that I have to get them to believe that Jesus came here and gave physical sight to the blind. It doesn't tell me that. It tells me that Jesus came to seek and save that which is lost. And what is that saving? What is that salvation? That's spiritual. What is the faith? What is faith? It's a gift of God. So there's nothing for me to require that person to do. I just kind of move through it and hope that the person believes. And the only people that can, or the only thing that can cause people to believe is God. You can't. A lot of people are mistaken on how it works. And sometimes they say it, but they don't understand what they're saying. Uh-oh. Oh, there it is. I thought I lost the key to my room. So I'm walking a little bit. It's a little irritated. I'm going to have to stop soon. But I have to get my walks in. So again, they knew I was walking, so they cursed me so I wouldn't walk, because they know if I don't walk, I gain in weight, maybe have poor health. So again, they're out there under the guise of law enforcement, under the guise of private investigation, under the guise of whatever it is, cursing people to poor health while physically operating them to poor health. And if they could, to a crime and immorality. I mean, can you imagine that? And people bring up Paul, but you're not Paul, all of you. You're not Paul. So again, you have to realize that we are in the end times. And it's a little bit different here. Because all these people went through their lives espousing the wealth and the power of their churches and their religions, their temples and their governments, while saying they are the true followers of Christ, at the same time causing others to fall. And they want me to believe that they're covered under the blood of Christ. I think Rabbi Jesus had other things to say about that. So again, very serious times with COVID-19. It does look to be weakening. I might be wrong, I might be right. It might be one strain over another. But what happens in viruses, and again, I mean, now I know why God showed me this earlier. I had no idea why he was showing me this. But he just gave me the thought. In viruses, if one strain weakens, they can still intermingle and cause the other strain to weaken with it. Now, vice versa, they could strengthen, but over time, most likely, if that's happening, COVID-19 will fizzle out and become something similar to anything else that we see, and it seems like we're seeing that. It would make sense. Wuhan was where it was created, theoretically, so that would see the brunt. And there's no denying that, irregardless of what China's first steps were, that it took people that were absolutely healthy. So again, we might be lucky in that, number one, it is getting warmer in the south. So those communities are experiencing warm noses to begin with. Remember, I told you if your nose drops 5 degrees, and I showed you the news article, I think it was, or research article, whatever it was, that if your nose drops 5 degrees, you're more likely to catch whatever the germ is going to give you, the flu or virus. So the noses are warmer in the south right now than they were in Wuhan. Also, cold, dry air is the preference of viruses and flus. And now what do we have in the south? Warm, wet air. And also, if it rains, it'll tend to wash it away off of things that it normally wouldn't wash it away from. And again, no insult to Chinese, Italians, or Iranians. We tend to take more showers than they do. And that's just a cultural thing. That's okay. But that may be part of it. Again, if I pass along, this deep state will celebrate and say, look, see, God has taken him. But again, I have to go someday, and one day my mission will be over here, and I'll move along. I was hoping to be married, real here. My first wife was slavery. I was asleep. I don't know how awake she was, but she obviously, when I had awakened, had realized that she had some sort of realization of the will and power and incantations and things like that. Don't hate her, never did. It was just a shame what her life had been, had become, and what the deep state did to her was the worst of it all. And we're talking about some pretty big psychological manipulation and psychological warfare. Now, people in government will tell you that there's no way to ever keep us safe without such psychological manipulations, but I'll tell you that that's a lie from the pits of hell that they come from and are and will be going back to upon passing from the planet, regardless of how many times they say Jesus. A devil's a devil, and that's just the way it is. Jesus didn't say he came to save the devils. Talked about the publicans and the harlots and the little people. But when you're a devil operating psychologically, spiritually, and physically to cause people to fall based upon a corrupt will, then That's just the way it is. Jesus was clear about the line of demarcation. Can God save you? Yes. I've always told you that. Will God save you? Most likely God is so furious that God won't hear you. Because why? Because that's what you willed. God not to hear people. And people not to hear God. That's really what your government's been up to. And there are cronies in the private sector, including foreign governments. Well, praise God in all you do. Stay peaceful. Remember to stay peaceful. Never be violent, but give way for God to have wrath, and that wrath is violent. Praise God.
You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry, presiding.
You can run, but you can't hide.